It's 6-1, RTE News with Brian Dobson and Sharon Niviolon.
It's the four-year plan, €10 billion in cuts and €5 billion in taxes by 2014.
It is a rational and sensible plan. It will bring us out of the steep downturn that we are already climbing out of, but it will ensure that as we climb out of it, we do so on a sustainable basis for the future.
The income tax net will be widened, VAT goes up, and tax relief on pensions for high earners will be phased down. Social welfare spending to be reduced by 14% and the minimum wage cut by €1 per hour.
We've been talking to the European Commission and I want to make it perfectly clear that any incoming government is not bound by any individual policy decision in this document.
The public service pay bill is to be cut by €1.2 billion. The workforce will be reduced by 24,000 and entry-level pay is cut by 10%. A €100 property tax will be introduced in 2012 and all households will be fitted with water meters. It's been a turbulent day on the markets, but Ollie Rehn has given the plan the thumbs up.
It is indeed an important contribution to the stabilisation of public finances, and it will form the basis for the EU IMF programme.
Good evening and welcome to 6-1. Hikes in income tax, new taxes and charges, cuts to social welfare and the public sector pay bill. These are just some of the measures to take €15 billion out of the economy and reduce our budget deficit by 2014. As officials from the IMF and the EU finalise the rescue package for the country, the government today published its four-year plan. There'll be substantial income tax increases and people on lower incomes will be brought into the tax system. Pension-related tax reliefs are also to be cut significantly. VAT will go up by 1% in 2013 and by another 1% in 2014. There'll be an interim property tax of €100 in 2012. The minimum wage is to be reduced by €1 an hour. There'll be further job cuts in the public sector and the pay bill will be cut by €1.2 billion, although the Croke Park Agreement remains in place. Pay scales for all new public servants will be cut by 10% and retired public servants will face cuts in their pensions. We'll have all the details on those measures in this specially extended 6-1. But first, on the announcement today, here's our political correspondent, David Davenpower.
Street protests ahead of this afternoon's announcement outside government buildings and yards away outside the hotel where the IMF delegation is staying. The protesters' view at odds with the Taoiseach and his finance minister, who insisted their plan would bring certainty about the future, even if they didn't try to disguise the depth of our problems, the solution to which would require less spending and more tax.
The basic idea behind this plan is to move our present levels of revenue, which are at levels of revenue of 2003 up to 2006. And then in relation to government spending, we have to reduce our spending from 2010 back to 2007 levels.
It is a rational and sensible plan. It will bring us out of the steep downturn that we are already climbing out of, but it will ensure that as we climb out of it, we do so on a sustainable basis for the future. A future which, as the Taoiseach said, will ensure that the next generations can enjoy the standard of living that we have had the privilege of enjoying in recent times.
The plan was based on an annual average growth rate of 2.75%. Recovery was beginning to take shape, but there was simply no alternative to finding €6 billion next year.
The basic fact here is that if we do not do a correction of €6 billion in this year's budget, we have no credible way of borrowing money to pay for our social welfare, to pay for our public salaries and to pay for our education system and our health system.
John Gormley said the Greens had managed to protect education, but maintained his party had inherited the problems that made painful cuts a necessity.
We know that we are in our current difficulties because of past mistakes, leading to an unsustainable property bubble, further inflated by reckless banking practices.
The Taoiseach admitted mistakes had been made, but maintained it wasn't a day for party politics.
Today is about Ireland putting its best foot forward. Ireland saying, yes, here's what we're prepared to do as a government and as a people to put to right the issues that have to be put to right.
And with the last word, Brian Lenihan insisted that when the election was called, the document launched today had to be accepted by all sides.
This document has to be the basis of any sensible proposals in the next general election. Anything else that's put forward is nonsense.
David Davenpour, RTE News, Government Buildings.
Well, apart from the widening of income tax bands and the abolition of certain tax reliefs, the introduction of domestic water metering is also among the revenue-raising measures in the plan. In total, €5 billion in new taxes will be raised. 2/5 of that will come next year, but the corporation tax rate is to remain unchanged.
Unsustainable is how the plan describes the fact that half of workers here pay no tax on their income, and so the income tax burden will return to 2006 levels, with 2/3 of the adjustment coming next year. The value of broadened bands and reduced credits will be cut by 1/5, raising almost €2 billion. The result for a single person earning €55,000 will be a 5% cut in take-home pay.
The number of individuals that are outside the tax net is clearly going to be reduced. Net effect of that is that they're going to lower the exemption threshold by approximately €3,000 down to €15,300.
Unspecified changes to excise duty next year will raise over €100 million. VAT will increase to 22% in 3 years' time, and by a further % the following year.
We know that the British are raising theirs in January also, so although there's a commitment to a 2% increase over the next 2 years, that will keep us in lockstep with the British. Therefore, the pull factors north of the border will not be what they were.
Capital gains and acquisition tax bases will broaden, while a range of reliefs will be abolished. Carbon taxes will double under the plan, while to boost local services funding, domestic water will be metered and an interim property tax of €100 will be introduced in 2012, with a full site valuation tax replacing it a year later.
We think the basis of assessment is incorrect and unfair, and is particularly biased against anybody who lives in towns or cities around the country.
But the good news for businesses, however, is the plan's steadfast commitment to keeping the corporation tax rate unchanged. But that's a commitment which our EU colleagues may yet seek to challenge. Will Goodbody, RTE News, Dublin.
There'll be major changes to private and public sector pensions. Existing public sector pensions above €12,000 will be cut, and new public servants will get lower pensions. For higher earners, tax relief on pensions will be cut to 20% over 4 years, bringing a substantial extra tax revenue, and the cap on pension contributions will be lowered.
Even with government incentives to encourage investment in pensions, around half the workforce have no pension provision other than the basic state pension. This 4-year plan will have huge implications for pensions in both the public and private sectors. Tax relief on pension contributions, currently worth up to 49%, will gradually be standard rated to just 20% by 2014. The annual cap for pension contributions will be reduced from €150,000 to €115,000. There's no confirmation of when the government will implement recommendations to tax retirement lump sums above €200,000. They hope to bring in almost €1 billion from these measures. There's pain in the public sector too. For the first time, existing pensioners will have their pensions cut by an average of 4% to partly mirror wage cuts for state employees. While pension income below €12,000 remains untouched, income above €60,000 faces a cut of 12%. The grace period for retiring on the pre-pay cut salary has been extended to February 2012, and there are details of the new, less favourable pension scheme for new entrants.
These reforms have suddenly come to a head because of the crisis, but we should have done these reforms years ago. Our pension system became totally tax-driven. It was very inequitable. The higher income, the better the benefits, and it became very removed from the idea of providing income to people in retirement.
The big question is whether the measures in the 4-year plan will discourage people from investing in pensions. If it does, then the state could save money in the short term. But in the longer term, without further reform, it could find more people relying totally on the state pension. Ingrid Miley, RTE News.
The 4-year plan envisages big cuts in the public sector. It will see staff numbers fall by over 13,000 in the next 4 years. That's on top of the 12,000 job cuts which have already taken place. The public sector pay bill will also be reduced, but the Croke Park agreement remains in place for the present.
They're among the most vocal and the most unionised workers in the state. But today's four-year plan is for big changes in how public servants work and how much they get paid for it. Salaries will return to 2005 levels, yielding savings of €1.2 billion. Staff numbers, which have already come down in recent years, will fall further. Around 3,000 jobs a year will go over the next 4 years. Health will see the largest staff reduction. More than 6,000 jobs are to go by 2014, which will lead to a reduction in the number of hospital beds, a move toward community health services. Garda numbers are expected to fall by 1,500. One thing that stays the same, though, is the Croke Park agreement. Education is the only public service where staff numbers will grow, but across the board, new staff will start on less money, 10% less.
There's a double whammy there. It's going to be reduced by 10% in the first instance, but they're also going to start on a lower point of the scale, a 0 point of the scale, which is about a 13%, in addition to changes in their pension. That is creating an incredible two-tier system in the public service and in teaching. Somebody who started on a Monday and a Friday having two completely different salaries, doing exactly the same job, and I think that's going to be the challenge for unions over the years, to equalise the pay scales for their members.
It's the government's plan that by 2014, Ireland will have a more efficient and effective public service. But in the interim, smaller budgets and fewer staff will certainly mean more disgruntled public servants. Sharon Tobin, RTE News, Dublin.
Let's turn now to health. €1.4 billion is to be cut from the health sector over the next 4 years. Charges for private beds is to go up. The fees paid by the health service to GPs and dentists is to be cut, and savings will also be sought on drug costs. Well, our health correspondent Fergal Bars is standing by. Fergal, you have the details. Bring us them.
Well, of that €1.4 billion to be cut from health over the course of this plan, the biggest slice comes out next year, €750 million. How the axe will fall, we'll see in the budget, and after that the HSE service plan. But we can see that 6,000 staff are to be cut from the health service. 3,000 of those have already agreed to go. And also there's a proposal to introduce a fair deal nursing home subvention system in this plan for older care. And Age Action Ireland is saying that that could mean older people paying on the basis of their income for home care, home health packages and also daycare services. That would be very controversial. All right, Fergal, for the moment, thank you.
Under the plan, the social welfare budget is to be reduced significantly, with cuts of almost €3 billion by 2014. €860 million will be cut in 2011 alone. The minimum wage, currently €8.65 an hour, is to be reduced by €1 to €7.65. The plan also puts a particular emphasis on getting the unemployed back to work. More details will be revealed in the coming weeks, as Samantha Library reports.
The social welfare budget will be cut, but exactly which areas won't be known until budget day. The plan doesn't say if payments to the unemployed will be reduced, but it says that greater job activation measures and improved techniques for tackling welfare fraud could minimise any reduction of welfare rates. The current minimum wage is to be cut by €1 to €7.65. Registered employment agreements and employment regulation orders which set minimum wages for certain sectors will also be re-examined. It also suggests a single child benefit payment with a supplementary payment for those on social welfare or low incomes, and it suggests a single social assistance payment for those on benefits such as one parent family and disability. The plan says some structural changes to the state pension will be required. This will include freezing the rates paid for the free travel and TV licence scheme for pensioners for the next 4 years.
It'll clearly have a substantial impact because we're talking about a €3 billion cut on a spend of €21 billion. So proportionately it's a very large cut. It's very difficult indeed to say what impact it will have because it's entirely unclear at this point as to how those cuts will be brought about.
Many people have been struggling with the basics, putting food on the table and heating and lighting the house. And with less money in the household budget for the poorest people, that means greater pressure for them.
The plan puts a particular emphasis on getting people back to work. It suggests a number of measures, including the extension of the work placement programme and the creation of an internship programme. The aim, it says, is to reduce unemployment traps and discourage long-term attachment to the social welfare system. Details of these schemes are to be published in the coming weeks. Samantha Librari, RTE News.